Imagine for a moment that the Jesus you were taught your entire life was incomplete. Not false, incomplete. Imagine a missing page that was never handed to you, a key quietly removed from the ring so the door would always stay shut. For centuries, a deeper current has run beneath the official story. Not in darkness, but in plain sight, hidden between the lines, behind creeds and edits, under layers of dogma, politics, and power. Ask yourself, if the kingdom of God lives within you, who loses power when you discover it? That is the question institutions fear, because a person who remembers their divine origin does not beg, does not bow, does not need permission to meet the source. So the most powerful religious machine on earth did what machines always do when faced with living fire: contain, rename, forbid. Not with one villain's speech, but with quiet mechanisms. Labels, councils, indexes, bonfires, and long strategic silences. What survived slipped through cracks, traveled in whispers, slept in jars under sand, and waited for an age that could see through smoke. This is not a museum tour. This is a retrieval mission. You will hear the forbidden sayings that shift the axis from believe and obey to know and become. You will see why certain gospels were branded dangerous, not because they were empty, but because they were empowering. You will understand why the name of Jesus was weaponized to guard a throne Jesus never asked to sit on. Stay with this to the end, and the pattern will click. What was buried was not merely a set of pages, it was a method, a mirror, a way of seeing that returns you to the center you were trained to forget. And when you finally see it, you will feel the lock turn inside your chest. Because the truth that matters most is not out there in a vault. It is in you. Tonight we unseal it. Let's speak plainly. The church hid it. Not a single parish on a random street. The institutional church is a power structure across centuries. It curated what you could read, filtered which voices could speak for God, and trained entire civilizations to confuse obedience with holiness. Why? Control of the narrative is control of the soul. Follow the motive. If salvation is mediated by priests, rituals, and official channels, authority flows upward. But if salvation is a living recognition, an awakening inside you, then power decentralizes immediately. No gatekeepers, no tolls, no fear-based lever to pull. So the message that threatened the machine had to be renamed. Heresy. Once a text wears that mask, everything else is easy. Remove it from the reading list. Shame those who quote it, punish those who copy it, and let time finish the job. This is how it works. When a teaching cannot be refuted, it is reframed. When it cannot be disproved, it is forbidden. When it cannot be destroyed, it is starved. By refusing to copy it, by exiling it from liturgy, by burying it under authorized commentary until it disappears from memory. Pages don't always burn in the square. More often, they are not recopied, and silence does what fire cannot. Listen to the language of power. Orthodox, canonical, safe, and its shadow, apocryphal, Gnostic, dangerous. These are not neutral labels, they are traffic lights for the mind. Green to proceed, red to stop. The average believer never even sees the red-lit road, so he concludes, innocently, that no road exists. But the road exists. The road was crowded. There were many gospels in the first centuries. Voices, visions, collections of sayings, different angles on the same blazing center. Some emphasized inner knowledge over external performance. Some honored a woman disciple as a bearer of revelation. Some reframed a villain as a participant in a larger design. What unites them is a single threat line to hierarchy. You are nearer to God than you were taught. And so the institution did what institutions do. It canonized what reinforced its structure and quarantined what dissolved it. It called one path faith and the other error, then taught generations to fear the second path as spiritual treason. That is not theology. That is policy. Understand this clearly. The target was never just a manuscript. The target was your agency. If the kingdom is within, you become responsible for meeting it. You stop outsourcing your conscience. You stop trading awe for approval. A church that stands between you and God cannot survive that shift. So the story was tightened, the edges filed down, the living spark managed. Not because the message was weak, but because it was too strong. Not because it was untrue, but because a truth that wakes you up is unprofitable to those who benefit from your sleep. Keep that frame, culprit, motive, method, because now we can ask the only question that matters. What exactly did they try to take from your hands? 3 doors. Open them and you'll understand the panic. Door 1. Thomas. No nativity scenes, no miracle reel, no crucifixion drama, just 114 sayings, short, surgical, addressed to the part of you that remembers. The voice doesn't demand worship, it demands recognition. It tells you the kingdom is not a prize after death, but a presence within and around you now. It warns that what you refuse to bring forth from within will turn against you. That is not a religion of spectators. That is a practice of sovereignty. If the holy is inside, the temple is your awareness. If the temple is your awareness, who needs intermediaries? That single shift from believe me to become it is a wrecking ball to hierarchy. Door 2. Mary. Not the caricature painted centuries later, but a disciple portrayed as intimate, lucid, entrusted. In these pages, she speaks of the soul rising through layers of fear and attachment, reclaiming its native light. The conflict is immediate. Peter wants jurisdiction. Mary carries experience. Who does Jesus affirm? The one who understands, not the one who controls. If a woman may bear revelation, what happens to an institution engineered to flow authority through male ranks? The system hears a death sentence and brands the text a blasphemy. What you hear is permission. Your access to the divine does not depend on role, gender, or office, only on the courage to look within. Door 3. Judas. Here the villain flips, not the cartoon traitor, but a participant in a design too large for fear to grasp. The point is not to rehabilitate his biography. The point is to detonate a theology of guilt. If even betrayal can be re-seen in a larger pattern, what happens to the industry of shame? What happens to the lever that keeps you small? A gospel that unhooks you from fear is useless to those who govern by fear. Now stack these doors and feel the weight. Thomas says the center is inside. Mary proves authority can speak through the one without a title. Judas rips the mask off guilt. 3 blows to the same target, a structure built on mediation and control. Of course, the label heresy followed. Of course, fear signs were nailed to the doors. Remember this, the pages are not the prize. The prize is what they activate. The quiet, dangerous clarity that you already are what you seek. That clarity cannot be regulated. It does not pay tithes to anxiety. It does not outsource its conscience. It moves like fire beneath ice. Those pages slept in clay and woke in your century. They crossed deserts to interrupt your programming right now. If you're still here, it's because a part of you recognizes its own handwriting in lines you've never read. You're not just learning information, you're being read by something old and alive. That is why the machine panicked. The next move was inevitable. Watch the gears turn. A movement becomes a machine. A flame becomes a brand. Charism becomes bureaucracy. Once faith is welded to empire, truth must be standardized like coinage, and anything that can't be stamped is melted down. How do you bury a living teaching without leaving fingerprints? You build process. Councils define the acceptable. Indexes list the forbidden. Anathemas place social landmines around questions you are not allowed to ask. Scribes trained to copy the approved stop copying the rest. Time does the quiet violence. A book that is never recopied becomes a book that never existed. Silence is the perfect fire. Then come the labels. Orthodox for ideas that reinforce the latter. Gnostic for ideas that pull the latter down. One word opens doors, the other shuts them. The public hears the stamp, not the argument. And because the stamp carries the weight of salvation, obey this or be lost, most people never risk the red-lit corridor. Not because they're weak, but because fear is efficient. Understand the tactic. When experience threatens management, replace experience with explanation. Codify mystery into propositions. Relocate wonder to the past. Make holiness a museum where only licensed guides can speak. Sacrament becomes spectacle. Spectacle needs spectators. Spectators are easy to govern, and yes, sometimes the gloves came off. There were flames, there were prisons, there were crusades launched not against foreigners but against neighbors who insisted on a purer light. But the more frightening method was always administrative. Paperwork that turns a revelation into a rumor into a danger into nothing. Policies outlive popes. Policies do the work while everyone sleeps. Ask yourself, why mobilize centuries of machinery to silence a triviality? You bury a shortcut, a direct line between the human heart and the living source that does not pass through the toll booth. You obscure it because a person who has tasted the inner kingdom is uncontrollable, unfrightenable, uninterested in being managed. So the narrative was narrowed, the edges sanded smooth, the wildness domesticated. A Christ who says, "Become what I am," is risky. A Christ who says, "Watch me from a distance," is safe. One produces sovereigns, the other subjects. Guess which one sustains a throne? The river didn't vanish, it went underground. Monks carried embers into the desert. Mystics kept the spark in the marrow. Stories survived under new names and symbols no edict could confiscate. The engine perfected erasure and still failed, because the one place it could never police is the one place the kingdom keeps choosing to appear. Inside you. Hold that in your chest. You've seen the method. Now trace the underground map of those who refuse to forget, and feel why the current still pulls in your direction. When a fire is smothered, it looks dead. In truth, it learns to breathe through stone. The message that threatened the throne did not vanish. It changed venues. It left the stage and moved into silence. It traded cathedrals for caves, applause for solitude, spectacle for practice. In the deserts, men and women walked away from the noise and took the gospel to its literal interior. No crowds, no pulpits, only dust, breath, and the long, steady gaze of awareness. They discovered what institutions fear most, the sacrament that needs no audience. Prayer as presence, communion as consciousness, a kingdom felt, not performed. They were called hermits and anchorites. I call them the first whistleblowers, the ones who realized that when you meet God in the cell of your own attention, the middleman resigns. From those cells a language grew. The stillness that cuts through compulsion, the watchfulness that exposes fear, the practice of turning the mind toward its source. You could extinguish a public ceremony by decree. You could not legislate a man's breath, so the river went underground and carved new channels. Monastic corridors, midnight vigils, whispered lines that said, "Look within," even when the official line said, "Look to us." Centuries turned, and the spark reappeared with dangerous clarity in the mouths of mystics. They spoke of the divine spark in the soul, not as poetry but as a live wire. They dared to say the eye with which you see God is the eye with which God sees you. For that they were questioned, censured, or forced to recant, and yet the sentence that matters most kept escaping. The Holy of Holies is closer than your breath. Then came a movement that refused to genuflect before the hierarchy. The Cathars of the Languedoc. They preached radical simplicity, refused the machinery of fear, live clean, let women serve, let conscience stand where custom kneels. They called the world a trap and light the native country of the soul. For that insolence, another kind of pastoral care arrived, armies under banners. In 1209, the crusade did not march on foreigners. It marched on neighbors. Towns burned, voices went silent. Ash wrote the minutes. When doctrine cannot persuade, steel will enforce. Why such thunder for nothing? Because inner freedom cannot be taxed. You can fine it, jail it, or kill its body, but power cannot milk a mind that has withdrawn consent. Violence tried to make remembering too expensive, and still the current moved. A manuscript hidden in a wall, a phrase smuggled in a hymn, a teacher speaking in riddles so the hungry could eat while gatekeepers missed the feast. The underground river learned every trick rivers learn. Disappear, reappear, change its name, find the lowest path through stone and keep the promise of water alive. The desert kept it. The mystics kept it. The condemned kept it, dying without surrender. And the river kept flowing toward the same sea, toward you, listening now, feeling a pressure in your chest that refuses to be domesticated. What survived isn't an argument, it is a current and it is pulling you home. Follow the echoes across borders and you hear the same sentence whispered in different dialects. The name changes, the center does not. The forbidden gospel says the kingdom is within and around you. The Hermetic tablet answers, as above, so below. As within, so without, different century, same geometry. Reality mirrors consciousness, the map is printed on the heart. Walk the Kabbalistic tree and you're walking an ascent, not to a sky palace, but through layers of perception from heavy to luminous. Each step loosens an identification. Each sphere reveals another facet of the one light. This is not a ladder for elites. It is a diagram of the journey every soul is already making when it stops outsourcing its becoming. If that sounds like the Mary text, soul rising through powers, shedding fear, you're hearing the harmony. Turn the page and Sufi poets sing the same code in love's language. They speak of the friend who was inside the house while you begged at the door. They spin and break their trance on purpose, because there is a window in the heart that opens when you stop worshiping distance. Not obedience to form, but surrender to presence. Not barter, but union. Alchemists got misread on purpose. Were they melting metals? Sometimes. Mostly they were melting identities. Lead to gold was the public cover. Transmutation of the self was the private work. Calcination, burn what you are not. Dissolution, let false certainty liquefy. Coagulation, let the real take shape. This is not workshop smoke. It is a manual for resurrection now. And then a modern voice points back and gives the old map a new lexicon. Jung says, the Christ image lives as an archetype in the psyche, a center of wholeness, a symbol of the self that pulls all fragments into one. He reads the old Gospels the way a navigator reads stars. Not to start a new church, but to help a human steer by inner light. He hears Sophia as the forgotten wisdom of the soul, the memory of fullness returning. Do you see the pattern? Different robes, same fire. Different alphabets, same sentence. The message keeps rewriting itself so no single priesthood can hold the copyright. When one institution tries to fence the pasture, the wind changes, the fence rusts, and the grass keeps growing from the inside out. If the church had delivered the full medicine, there would be no need for echo chambers across continents. But control creates return. Whenever a gate closes, the teaching finds another tongue. Whenever a library burns, a poem catches fire in somebody's chest, so the secret learned to travel light. It wraps itself in proverbs and parables, in symbols and songs, in diagrams and dances, in anything that can pass through customs without being taxed. It waits wherever people are honest enough to admit that the voice they seek is already speaking inside them. One secret, many languages. One center, many roads. If you have ears to hear, none of this is controversial. It is familiar, like remembering a name you loved before you forgot it. The point is not to become a collector of systems. The point is to recognize the same sun rising through every window and turn toward it where you stand, within. Theory flatters the mind. Practice changes you. If the forbidden current says the kingdom is inside and around you now, then the only honest test is to enter it, without intermediaries, without props, without waiting for permission. No altars, no incense, no audience. Just you and the living center you were trained to outsource. Here is the straight path, spoken once to be done anywhere. Sit or stand without ceremony. Let the spine lengthen as if a quiet thread lifts you from above. Close your eyes or don't. The gate doesn't care. Breathe in a little deeper than usual and let the exhale be longer than the inhale. Do this 3 times, not to summon anything, but to admit you were holding the door shut. Now place your attention at the center of your chest, not the heart that pumps blood, the heart that knows. Don't visualize. Notice. There is a warm, neutral brightness available there when you stop rehearsing your name. On the next exhale, let the body breathe you. You are not pushing breath. Breath is happening. Inside that rhythm, ask, silently and simply, show me what is true now. Not make me special, not prove a theory, just what is true now. Then do the most forbidden thing of all. Believe your own clarity. The first clean note that arrives before fear starts negotiating. That is the voice the machinery tried to drown with noise. If thought storms come, let them pass like weather. If emotion surges, widen the sky that holds it. The goal is not blankness, the goal is contact. You will know you have touched it because something in you gets very simple and very brave at the same time. The mind stops bargaining. The chest feels spacious. The next honest action appears without the usual committee meeting. Make this a sacrament of presence, not performance. 30 seconds in a hallway. 2 minutes before you answer the message you always answer from fear. 5 breaths before you step where you usually shrink. Every time you enter, you loosen a link in the chain that kept your worship exported and your power leased. Understand the stakes. A person who can return to inner contact on command becomes ungovernable by panic and advertising. You stop running on guilt. You stop spending your life to buy approval you never needed. The system calls this arrogance. It is actually humility. You are bowing to what is real in you rather than to what is loud around you. What was hidden? Not a magic spell. A capacity. A way of recognizing the Christ light as a state, not a statue, as awareness, not an argument. You are not waiting for a priest to bless you into access. The access is native. The only price of admission is your attention. The only ritual is your honesty. The only tithe is the habit you lay down each time you choose presence over programming. Do this once and you will feel relief. Do this daily and you will feel authority, not over others, but over the weather inside your own house. Do this when you are afraid and you will watch fear shrink in a room it no longer owns. This is the forbidden mechanism in its simplest form. Come inside. Ask what is true. Obey the clarity. Everything else is costume. Here is the key they never wanted fitting your hand. Christ is not a name. Christ is a level of seeing. Jesus embodied it to point you to it, not to monopolize it. The scandal is not that one man touched God. The scandal is that you can too, and when you do, the business model of fear collapses. You were taught to admire the flame from a distance. The hidden teaching says, become fire, not by swagger or performance, but by remembrance. The more you return to the inner kingdom, the more the old architecture loses jurisdiction. Shame stops collecting rent. Guilt stops writing your calendar. The authority you use to project upward stabilizes within, and you begin to live like someone who found the spring under their own floor. This is why it was buried. A populace that knows itself as light does not bow to managers of darkness. A soul that can drink directly no longer buys water at the gate. An awakened heart is useless to tyranny. You cannot be herded by threats once you've tasted what cannot die. So let the sentence land. You are the living gospel, not a book on a shelf, but a message in motion. Every time you choose truth over fear, the text continues. Every time you forgive instead of perform, the text continues. Every time you return inside and act from clarity, the text writes you in letters power cannot erase. Pages can be hidden. People who remember cannot. The second coming feared most is not a sky event. It is a ground invasion of ordinary lives embodying the state Jesus pointed to. Here, now, quietly unstoppable. If this resonates, don't turn it into another idea to admire. Practice it. Speak from the center you touched in Chapter 6. Make one decision today that a frightened version of you would never make. Let the inner kingdom set the next small step, and take it. Welcome back to what never left you. The veil is thinner than a breath. The door is already open. Walk in.